Scarcity really only exists when people's money and time are limited. They have to find a balance between their needs and wants, and then adjusting their time and money in order to fit these needs and wants. Trade-offs in economics happen basically when you're giving up one thing for another, the costs. And economic models are used to describe how economic system works. There are three basic questions that each economic system should answer: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce it for. There are also four basic economic systems: traditional, command, market, and mixed. The American economy has six basic characteristics. They are limited government role, freedom of enterprise, freedom of choice, profit incentive, competition, and private property. Consumer decision making involves your income, taxes, necessities, and savings. Before you buy any kind of product, small or large purchase, you should gather information before to see if maybe you can buy a better quality one or maybe something that's cheaper, more durable. As a consumer, you have consumer rights which are protected by the congressional legislation. But also, you also have responsibilities. And a smart consumer should be aware of both of these and try to seek a balance between these two. The cost of credit is basically your interest charged on your money borrowed. The longer you borrow the money, the higher the interest rate is going to be. There are two main sources of credit: cards and charge accounts, which are basically credit cards, debit cards, bank accounts. And then there's financial institutions, which are banks, companies, and credit unions, who are, basically give you money before you have it. And then this is all based on your credit worthiness, which can involve your how often you pay your payments, your debt to income ratio, if you have bankruptcy in the past, or even unemployment. When buying anything, there's always a trade-off between the quality and price. Generally, it's if you pay a lower price, the lower the quality of it, and if you pay a higher price, the higher quality it is. So this could come in mind when you're deciding whether to rent or buy a home, such as if you're renting a home, there's lower monthly costs. You have more options if you want to move, and you don't really have to worry about the utilities. Whereas if you own a house, you can build up your equity, there's tax benefits, and basically you can tell people you own a house. The same thing applies to whether you want to buy a used or new car. You have to consider the fuel efficiency, the engine, whether it has a warranty or insurance, and all that kind of stuff. You could save your money for several reasons, but the main reason is to save your money for the future. As for investing, when you invest, you're basically looking to gain more money than you put into the thing, which is you could have invested in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And when you're doing saving and investing, you want to look to diversify, basically not putting all your eggs in one nest. You should try to spread it out, and remember that the greater the risk, the greater the return, but also the opposite applies as well. The law of demand basically says that as the price goes up, demand will go down. As the price goes down, the demand will go up. As for a law of supply, it's different. As the price goes up, the supply goes up, and as the price goes down, the supply will go down. There's actually a point at which the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied will meet, and this is called the equilibrium price. Every business operation has four main elements. You have the expenses, advertising, record keeping, and risk. As for how they are organized and owned, there's two main types. It's the sole proprietorships, which are basically owned by one person, and partnerships, which are owned by two or more people. And the majority of business revenues in the US are brought in by corporations, which, although they are owned by many people, but by law they're treated as if they're individuals. There are four basic market structures: perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. Perfect competition and monopolies are really rare, whereas monopolistic competition and oligopolies are much more common. The level of competitiveness in a market are based on several factors such as size, number of sellers, and control over price. There are also government regulatory agencies who try to promote efficiency, competition, fairness, and safety by enforcing certain rules. Um, these agencies, some of them are FCC, the FDA, the SEC, and the EPA. Before expanding, you should always do a cost-benefit analysis. If the benefits outweigh the costs, then you go right ahead to financing. And when borrowing funds, you need to consider between short, which is 30 to 90 days, and it's usually used for paying bills. Intermediate, 1 to 10 years, usually used for buying land or buildings, or whether you want to do long term, which is 10 to 15 years and basically used for major expansion projects and long lasting stuff. After you have your money, they need to consider the production process, which is planning, purchasing, quality control, and then inventory control. The main purpose of marketing is basically to convince consumers to buy a product as it will be advantageous to them in some way. There are four P's in marketing: product identification, price, place, and promotion. And goods usually move through distribution channels along a chain, which is from the manufacturer to the wholesaler to the retailer and then to the consumer. There are a number of factors affecting the supply and demand for jobs, some of which are the skill level required for each job, the job conditions, the work location, and as for each job, there are also labor unions who strive to improve working conditions and wages, as well as unemployment insurance and healthcare benefits. But ever since the 1950s or mid 1950s, working conditions has improved greatly, so the need for unions has kind of died down. So union membership has, in correspondence, declined as well. A nation's gross domestic product, or otherwise known as GDP, is basically determined by the total dollar value of all the goods and services produced annually. When measuring for this, you have to account for inflation, which adjusts the GDP, and then therefore there are a couple ways to do this, such as the customer price index, the producer price index, and the GDP price deflator. As for the price level of the overall economy, this is determined by the combination of the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply. Aggregate meaning basically the total demand and the total supply. The functions of money are basically to act as a medium of exchange, a unit of accounting, and then a store of value. There are characteristics in which the money has to hold, which are that it had to be accepted, scarce, durable, stable, portable, and divisible. Types of money include bills, coins, savings, accounts, debit and credit cards, deposits, any kind of that stuff. The primary function of the Federal Reserve System is basically to control money supply, but they also regulate money supply, supervise banks, clear checks, as well as many other responsibilities. Based on the need that they see to promote economic growth and employment, they can either employ a loose or tight money policy. Loose being that money is easy to borrow and consumers usually buy more, and tight being that money is difficult to borrow and consumers usually buy less. They also have several tools to regulate money supply, some of which are changing the discount rate, changing the reserve requirements, and open market operations.